Hey, you old ghosts and goblins out there. Welcome back to another episode of I'll Call You Right Back podcast with me, your host. My name is Chad Medved. This is my show. Appreciate you being here as usual. I got a very special episode this week. As all of you might have known, a couple weeks ago, I dropped an episode with John Shalkowski, who runs Odd Pittsburgh. Odd Pittsburgh is a Facebook, Instagram, social media account that posts all of the weird, odd, bizarre things that have happened in our city that no one knows about except for John. John is if you listen to the first episode, you know what type of person John is. He is a mad scientist. He is a guy that has more information in his brain than I could even imagine, and he's pretty savvy at pulling it out. Me and him sat down for our first episode, probably a month ago now, but it was insane. Hands down, the most feedback I've ever gotten on an episode. People were all about it. They loved it. It was a two-parter of just absolutely ridiculous things that you have never heard about that had to do with Pittsburgh. Everything from, Pittsburgh being the birthplace of professional hockey to Gustav Whitehead being the first person to take flight in an airplane to, countless things. But I heard everyone's feedback. I heard everyone's opinions. I know everyone wanted more. So I've been berating John to come back to the studio and to focus his passions of historical knowledge strictly on spooky ass shit, because for all of October, I focus my episodes to kind of revolve around that October vibe of spooky Halloween, the whole nine. And man, did it not disappoint. John came over and we sat down for arguably the weirdest and most creepy episode I've ever sat down and enjoyed. Or conversation that I've ever sat down and enjoyed. But we talk about all kinds of wild shit. John reads spooky stories. He reads some news articles about people that have real premonitions. We talk about real life boogeymen that have literally scared multiple people to death. We talk about haunted houses. We talk about possession. We talk about all kinds of stuff. I am beyond excited for this episode. I am beyond excited for you to hear this episode. As we all know, I'm very, very into the Halloween vibe. I'm very, very into all the spooky stuff. And this is everything that I could have wanted with an episode. Me and him recorded on a Friday night. It was almost 4 hours long. And, by the time we were done, my wife was already asleep. So I was sitting up in my living room by myself. The dogs were asleep and I was creeped out because, John just had countless stories that he was just pulling out that just, these are the stories that John brings up, regardless if it's this episode or the previous one. These things are all very, very documented, credible sources. And, John's not just, he's not just blowing smoke. This guy is the epitome of proof. All he wants is proof. He wants to be the one that proves that ghosts are real. He wants to be the one that proves that aliens are real. He wants to be the one, honestly, he doesn't even care if it's him. He just wants proof in general. But this episode, absolutely fantastic. I'm excited for you to hear it. This week, we are dropping part 1. Obviously, next week, we will drop part 2. So buckle up for this one. Definitely say a prayer, wash yourself, smudge yourself with some sage, because shit gets spooky. So without further ado, actually 220. We're on episode 220. That's a pretty big milestone, and John is a perfect guest to fulfill that milestone. So I'm going to be enjoying my vacation with my wife. I'm going to stay off my phone as much as I can, but I hope you enjoy the episode. Share it to all your friends and family. Share it to everyone who loves the city of Pittsburgh, who might love Halloween, who might just love that fall vibe, because it's here. Hoodie weather's here. Also, last week I spoke to Ricky Dick of Castle Blood in Monessen. I urge you all, to go to Castle Blood tomorrow, get in line, and go experience one of the best haunted houses in the city. Their opening night, October 7th, Friday night. You can get tickets online at thecastleblood.com. And I hope you go and check it out because it is well worth it. All right, without further ado, episode 220 of I'll Call You Right Back podcast with John Shalkowski, a.k.a. Odd Pittsburgh.
I gotta use the telephone.
Hello?
Telephone.
I'll call you right back. Call you right back.
Telephone.
I'll Call You Right Back podcast.
Have you ever heard of the Congliere Mansion?
I have never heard of
Or
that.
the Ridge Avenue Mansion that
I've
exploded?
never heard of that. Now, wait. Just
Yes. Let's evolve. Anyways,
we just have to hold on
Yeah.
1 second.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
This is going to be crazy. I already know it is. You got a stack of papers here. You got a book. I want to be able to do this in a way where we could, kind of crack into what you brought, because the last time we spoke, you had a binder. We literally didn't even open up. So
Yeah.
it was very, very, so I've been mentally trying to prepare for this, so I want to kind of get an idea of like what you have here. You don't have to go into detail, but you kind of just let me know like what you got here so we could kind of plan this out. You got some stories that you want to read, and then you got some news articles.
Which we'll read, which
Okay.
are our stories.
Okay.
Some weirder than others.
Okay.
The boogeyman included in these stories.
Okay.
We could preface the boogeyman story with personal ghost stories.
Yeah. So I want to open this up. I want to know what Halloween means to you, and what does that mean to you, and what was that like for you growing up?
Yeah. All right. So, well, as far as I can remember, I always wanted to be a Ghostbuster. So
I think you brought that up last time. You're wearing a hoodie, Ghostbuster hoodie right now.
yeah, if I was brave enough, I'd get the emblem tattooed to my arm,
Yeah.
permanently.
You should.
Ghostbuster for life. I might, since I was, literally born, I guess, my first memory of a VHS tape was Ghostbusters. So I watched this movie 1,000 times.
Yeah.
Prior to having kids, which I've watched 1,000 times more, So it's, something that I always wanted to just emulate and do. And I love the cartoon as a kid, especially. And
Absolutely.
Egon, of course, being my favorite, the scientist. And that kind of person, that scientist, they're looking at these kind of crazy, scary situations that they might be encountering or whatever, and to face them with bravery,
Yeah.
without fear. You might be afraid. There's episodes where they're afraid. But how do you conquer those fears, without even busting the ghosts?
Everything has a solution.
So Egon is my kind of spirit animal growing up as a kid. And as soon as I could start doing things on my own, like back in 1992 or something like this, when I was like 10 years old, I started trying to seek out and find out, and I would read everything I possibly could get my hands on, like any kind of paranormal activity or those Time Life books that you would see, like of monsters or whatever.
Yeah.
And I would just love that content, Goosebumps and all those types of books, came out when we were kids. And
Yeah, for sure.
so I was like just into that type of stuff. But there was no such thing as Ghostbusters or Ghost Hunters or any show like that on television or anybody even.
Yeah, and there was no internet where you could
Mentioning
look
it.
at all this stuff.
You couldn't
So it
even
was
bring
like-
it up. No one knew what you were talking about when you talked about EVP.
I guess I never really thought about that. So like whenever I was younger, I knew of like the horror movies that came out, you had scary movies, but like I don't ever remember any like TV shows or any groups. I think the first people that I remember that were like ghost hunters were them people from like Penn State or something like that.
Yeah. And that was like 2006 or something like that. It was,
I
mid
feel like
2000s.
I feel like before that, the closest thing you would have is like a TLC show about like a sunken ship
like
or something.
in America or something like that. Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And I didn't. That's weird you say that though, because now it's like this like fanatical
Every other
crazy.
channel. Yeah, it is. It's like a craze now. But I was involved in that like way back when. I was always listening to stories told by my mother or my grandmother tell me ghost stories, and and they would scare me. And I was an only child, so I had a very, very active imagination.
Yeah.
Everything scared me. And and how that kind of translated into Ghostbusters and trying to fight your fears, and then legitimately trying to do it. So all throughout high school, like that's what I wanted to do. One of my many things, because I have 50 things I want to do.
Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to do, like actually go to college for, though, was parapsychology. And at that time, there was only one.
That's like ghosts?
That's like the scientific study of the paranormal.
Oh, wow. I didn't even know that was a thing.
It's kind of like, in the beginning of Ghostbusters when he's showing him like here's a couple of squiggly lines.
Yeah.
It's like that. It's trying to prove like psychic abilities and psychic, that type of stuff. And
parapsychology?
Yeah.
Wow.
And to try it's the actual study of it. Only one university in the world did it at that time, and that was Duke University. So I was planning on going there, but ended up wanting to go to film school instead.
Now, whenever you were younger, did you have experiences of like ghosts or anything like that?
Yeah. So, like I mentioned, I was an only child.
Yeah.
My dad would work all the time. He'd come home late at night or whatever. My mom was a teacher, and she'd be grading papers all night long or doing her thing and stuff. And I'd be up to just, let alone to myself, just to think, or be creeped out about everything.
Yeah.
That'd be going on. And I had a hard time even sleeping in my own room for a long time as a kid, because I just like wanted to sleep on the couch, near my mom or something, just so I could hear what was going on and not be scared or whatever. It took a long time.
Dude, I fell asleep with the TV on until I was like probably 15.
I had no TV in my room. Yeah, I had a radio, would play like 3WS or something on, and that if that, really. And I just would allow myself to get afraid. Maybe it could be that. Maybe that I was just too afraid one night, but I did have a very unusual thing happen when I was a kid that still scares me to this day.
How old?
So I must have been a little bit older. So I was probably like 12 or 13.
Okay.
I was a teenager, that type of age, like early teens, like preteen, I guess.
What time is this?
8 p.m., not even late at night.
So it's not like 3 a.m., the witching hour.
All my friends are over. I had like 3 or 4 friends over my house.
Oh, shit.
And we were watching just normal TV, just like funny comedy stuff. Like we weren't watching anything spooky at all. It wasn't Halloween time. It was like the middle of March. It was like nothing out of the ordinary was going on. My mom, like always, would be in the kitchen where she had like a little TV where she'd be grading papers and things at this like kitchen table. And there was like a doorway behind her to the dining room, and then another doorway like over there to a living room. And we're all coming upstairs. Everyone's leaving, getting ready to go. And so I walk everybody up my basement steps to come upstairs and everything. And my mom's there, like everything's cool and stuff. But behind my mom, in the door frame, was like this 8-foot tall black shadow figure.
Jesus.
One of those ones you hear about, you know, the shadow man.
100%.
And I could tell he was looking right at me, even though he had no face. It was just a black shadow, like something you just couldn't see through, but you knew something was there.
Everyone else was there, and
everybody was there. I screamed like a little girl, and like to the point where I tried to like not sleep in that house that night.
Yeah,
and my friends were like
it was
thought vivid. It was a joke at first, until they could see I was not kidding around.
Jesus.
So to this day, I live in the same house now with my own kids, and I'm always the last one.
You're living there still?
Yeah. I moved back in years later. And it's never been creepy. I mean, I always get creeped out. Like if I'm coming up the steps, I'm always like,
"Is it an old house?
Someone's going to chase me up the steps or something."
I do it all the time.
I think everybody does that. But and the kids have never really complained. There is some strange things in my old bedroom, which is now my kids' room. And they'll wake up like with night terrors or something strange like that.
Jeez.
Which is like a bad dream you can't get them awake out of.
100%.
And then, but nothing like I experienced.
And this was only one time you experienced isolated?
It was that one and single time, and big enough
vivid.
to affect me to this day. So like I'll come up late at night today, because I'll stay up all night working or whatever, and I'll sometimes be up at 3 a.m. or whatever, and everyone's long asleep.
Where did this happen in your house?
In the kitchen, like
the main
area of the house. Yeah, so like it's still.
So you're always going in and out of there
every day. Yeah. So even today, I don't try to if I go up there by myself, I don't look over in that corner on purpose. I'm like, just leave me alone.
Yeah.
But it still does freak me out. And the other weird thing about supernatural thing, I guess, personally as a kid. Now, I as a teenager, I would go out on ghost hunts, and I would conduct ghost hunts from people, they had no idea. So I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. So I took them all over the place. And we'd have some creepy things that would happen, but it was really just more of us being creeped out,
Making it
each other,
happen in your
yeah,
mind.
not actual things happening. I have, which we'll talk about.
Yeah.
I've been to ghost hunts where things might have happened.
Yeah.
Nothing scary though, but if something did happen.
Now, you're a researcher, you're a historian. Yeah. Did you ever research your house?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like, what was there anything that ever like stuck out? Like, no
nothing
crazy
unusual.
shit.
Nobody died in it. The people who owned. There's only been 2 owners. The people who bought built it, and then my parents.
Yeah.
And then and I've met the people who built it.
What about before it was a
ago.
house? Like before those people?
It was a cow pasture. Yeah, for a long, long time. And I know everything about the history of that land. And there was nothing unusual.
No Indian burial sites or nothing?
Yeah, nothing like that. But
that's weird.
But the other weird thing from my childhood. Now, like I said, I was an only child. So, you get lonely sometimes,
Were you someone who was always watching horror movies and stuff?
Well, I would like to watch that type of stuff, but then I'd always creep myself out.
Yeah.
But I would always try to get my friends over and try to creep them out on purpose, or try to tell them the scariest stories.
Well, I ask you that just to make sure. I'm trying to understand if you're like creating stuff in your mind at this age.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And then, so anyways, I had an invisible friend.
I think you told me this last episode.
I might have, yeah. And I remember his name was George. I remember he was a crocodile or an alligator, like his face. Was it either a crocodile or an alligator, some kind of gator?
Or a
reptile-ish.
Reptilian being.
A reptilian being about 3 feet tall who wore like shirt and shorts or like normal clothes like me, but was like the shape of like a crocodile. And his face, and he spoke English, and he would sit. And I remember being my parents had this real thick carpet in our living room, and you could like with your finger or like a butter knife, you could like kind of move your finger in it and carve a little bit into it. And I remember one specific time where he did that with me, and like made that with me. Yes,
and it like made an indentation.
Yeah. Now the only other thing.
How old?
That I was young. I was probably like 6 or 7.
Okay, so that could be, I'm not calling
Younger.
I'm not saying it's
Right.
bullshit, but I mean, you could be having an overactive imagination.
Correct. So now I remember him being around for just that brief times in my life, and then just went away.
Now let me ask you a question. Whenever you have an imaginary friend, like I never had one.
Right.
So how does that like, does he like just walk out of your closet one day and it's like, hey, I'm George? Or like how does that even start to happen?
From what I remember, I was probably pretty young. So from what my memory can tell me, and I have a pretty good memory, like he would just be there. So it would be like I'd be playing, and then he would just be there too, or he would just come out of nowhere basically and just be there to keep you company.
I mean, like one day, like you weren't just freaked out by this?
Apparently not. And I told my parents about it and stuff like that, and I even drew a picture, which I forgot about until maybe 25 years later.
Wow.
When I was cleaning out my parents, after my dad died, I was cleaning out everything that they had, and I came across all these, like, they never threw anything away that I ever had. And one of these things was like a crayon drawing. I kid you not. I'll have to find it because I did keep it out somewhere. But it says, "Hi, my name's John. This is my friend George."
Jesus.
And then it says, as plain as I can see, "George is a ghost."
Oh my God.
And then just period. That's all. No explanation.
Jesus.
So now I don't remember him as being a ghost. That's the thing.
Yeah.
I don't remember him. I remember him as being a tiny crocodile, man, or whatever, like, and not a ghost. So I don't know what.
Do you remember being like scared, or it was just like a welcoming?
Never scared. Yeah, it was super welcoming. So not way later in life, I don't know how I came across it, but like 3 years ago, maybe at the most. I mean, I'm talking like recently in my life, I came across this image of an Egyptian god. It was a crocodile face in a human body.
No way.
Who like appears to people throughout time. I can't remember his name. I'll have to look it up. But it's Rick Seebeck actually is the one who told me about that. And then I looked it up and I was like, oh my God. And I was like, what does this even mean?
Holy shit.
What is going on? So who knows? It might have been just a bizarre coincidence. Egyptian gods, ghost, who knows?
Jesus. But are you someone who has do you have like premonitions?
Oh yeah. Well,
like accurate ones, because like, now listen,
Yeah.
people that are listening to this right now, I feel like there's one of three ways. There's someone who's just like, whatever, who knows if this is real or not. There's someone who's like, this dude's telling the truth. And there's someone's like, this dude's a bullshitter.
Right.
Now, I can understand how people are saying it's a bullshitter. I'm not a skeptic at all.
Right,
so
right.
like, I don't feel like you would have any reason to lie about this at all. So I lean into these types of things. Now I'm curious as far as like, if you have these like you have premonitions, like you might be touched, you know what I mean?
Right.
Some weird type of shit,
Right.
Who's to say? Who's to say?
Right.
Now, what type of like things do you like?
Well,
Are you able to like think about?
I could tell you right now, and I'll say this with 99.9% confidence, that there are no such thing as ghosts, that there is no such thing as a psychic, that there is no such thing as premonitions.
Now,
Now, do
talk to
I
me
believe that people can't predict things? Of course, people can predict things. I have such a great knowledge of the past, just within Pittsburgh, that you name any news story, what happened, I'll tell you like 2 ways, 3 ways that's going to end up. One of them will be correct, just because history repeats.
Yeah,
It doesn't
cyclical.
rhyme, and like it's always the case. Always the case. Now, has someone ever proved in a lab, that ghosts are real? The answer is no. Has anyone ever proved, in a lab that, religion is real? 100% no. Anybody ever proved, you could list goes on and on and on.
Yeah, aliens, any of that.
Unfortunately, as it is,
Actually, I guess aliens are technically proved.
aliens are the same thing though. And it's gonna sound real sucky, but I'm a big believer in reason.
Yeah.
And what is truth and what can be seen and heard and witnessed,
Yeah,
There's always going to be
evidence.
unexplained things until it can be explained. Now, until it's explained, it is unexplained. Of course, it's creepy. Of course, it's something strange about it. But is it real? Until you can prove me 100% otherwise, the answer, at least according to most what you would call science,
Science. Yeah. Is no.
means no. And so there is no such thing as ghosts. Now, me saying that, why did I devote a lot of time in my life trying to find ghosts? Why do a lot of people join up the monastery and look for God? Why do people join up all these things, right? Because they're seeking some kind of answer. They're seeking some kind of truth.
Yeah.
A truth beyond and not being sad. And unfortunately, it has to do, and I didn't realize this till later in life, but it has a little bit to do with not being satisfied with what's here and now in reality, and more of kind of like these pipe dreams of a unproven future or something that doesn't end. People have a really hard time dealing with death.
Yeah.
Just
100%.
death in general. It's a sad event. It's an inevitable event. It's something that will happen, guaranteed, to every single person you know. So now, how do you deal with that? Well, it would be nice, to think that, when I die, that, I'm in some magical cloud and there's everybody I ever knew.
Yeah.
But then where does that stop? Where did all the cats and dogs go? Where did all the, everybody go?
100%.
They can't all be there, right? Now, not only that, but no one's ever.
Why can't they all be there, though?
Well, that's the thing. They could all be there. Why not?
could.
There could also be, free beer there, for all we know. Like, I don't know. It could be anything.
I get it, but like there's
No one's
where's
ever proven it.
Yeah, where's the proof?
Right. There is no proof. There's zero proof. There's zero, zero.
Like literally zero. of
Not
any of
even
this.
1%.
Yeah.
Now, you could say people are very passionate with their beliefs, or
Yeah.
like, I truly believe I was abducted by an alien and probed and all this stuff, and I believe it. I've taken a lie detector test, and I believe it. The test says I believe it. It's like, well,
Yeah, no proof though.
there's no proof. So now, do I want to find proof? Yes. That's why I'm so interested in it. That's
Yeah.
why I want to seek out the answer. I want to look into the weirdest, craziest shit and try to prove it wrong or prove it right. And plenty of examples. One of the stories that I talked about, that most haunted house story, is exactly one of these stories that was proven to be wrong, proven to be made up, proven because the story actually involves the mafia. And they use the ghost story as a cover up.
No way.
Yeah. So that's like that'll be our first story. We'll go into the first story, okay?
Okay. Jesus.
When I first started my page, obviously it's called the odd, mysterious, fascinating history. And I specifically wanted to do nothing but odd, mysterious history.
Yeah, that's what we said back here.
Right.
Not the same things, how did Heinz start? But you wanted to talk about the things that, that are incredible that happened here that people don't know about.
All the weird stuff, like where were the public hanging grounds? I know, so like on the corner of Ross Street downtown. So like, what are the origins of all these different things? I'll start actually with this article because it's worth starting with the cursed land of Allegheny County.
Oh my God.
So now, as you know, Native Americans once inhabited this land for 10,000 years.
Yeah.
Now, the people who were here way back ancient times, we know nothing about, and their culture and their religion and what they prayed to. We know that there's petroglyphs that have been found, which they have thunderbirds on and other strange mythical creatures.
Let me ask you a question real quick. What's the difference between a petroglyph and a hieroglyph?
Petroglyph are stones, boulders, sometimes could be just flat areas of rock that appear in creek beds or rivers. That sometimes the water will recede enough to where you could kind of go out into them and carve with another stone onto that stone. Handprints, circles, animals, other strange things, and people, native people, like it was like their early form of graffiti. And it really was like graffiti. It wasn't like meant to be art. It was like people on purpose were like writing their name in the sand.
Yeah.
And it just happened to be still there.
Did you see the stones that have recently, the waters receded and there's been carvings on the rocks that said like, this is a terrible time or whatever that.
No, yeah.
I'm gonna have to send you it. I'm gonna butcher it, but it's kind of gloomy.
Well, yeah. So you have these legends. So that's the first thing I thought about. In Pittsburgh history, I'm like, well, what are the oldest ghost stories of Pittsburgh? We all know these kind of current day stories or these strange,
like Green Man's Tunnel.
Green Man's or the Omni William Penn Hotel or just like other strange places downtown, the old Allegheny County Jail, the old morgue, or places that would be like obvious haunts. But where did it begin? Was there any Native American legends that maybe have been lost to time? Maybe their spiritual essence is pretty strong. What happens to these legends when these people go away? I actually read a really great article in the newspaper from 1942, I think it was, where this guy said that same question. He goes, all these ghost stories you hear of Pittsburgh's past, when the people move away and the people who knew these stories die and forget, and the stories are not passed on, what happens to all the ghosts, the ghosts and specters and spooks and, goblins and stuff? What happens to them? They just disappear? Along with them? Maybe. Because maybe they're not real, right? Or do the legends take a life of their own? And where do legends even begin? The Green Man's the perfect example. Like it began with a real person. Yeah. Who had a disfigurement, who people poke fun at. Yeah. And just like, did this and this kind of like legend arose out of them.
And people created it. They manifested it.
Yes, they made it up. Now, I did talk about, did I talk about that whole Tulpa thing last podcast?
Tulpa,
the Buddhist belief of the manifestation of your imagination.
No, talk to me about it.
I'll save it for when we get to the boogeyman story.
Okay.
All right. So anyways, back to the origin of like, what is the oldest ghost story in Pittsburgh? What is the oldest, like, how does it begin?
Yeah.
Is there any kind of thing left over from the French even or the natives? And I found this. This is from 1857.
This is a news article?
It's a newspaper article.
Okay.
It's talking about how they cleansed Allegheny City, which is north side today, from the demons of its past, it says.
Jesus.
1857, from the Pittsburgh Daily Post. And it's not a long article, but here it goes. Years and years ago, yet not beyond the memory of men now living, a man did that which he did not know. He had a feeling in his heart. In the act of generosity rather than charity, he gave a tract of over 100 acres of land surrounding a rather insignificant village to the villagers, known as the common cow pasture. He hated brawls, and knowing what trouble a cow could cause by trespassing in the pasture of another, he took the means of securing perpetual peace in this village. So far, at least, as the village cow was concerned, there might have been no trouble over it after his death. He deeded this pasture to the corporation to be used as a commons forever, so that it can never be used for anything else without destroying that title of the commons. So he's talking about Allegheny Commons,
yeah,
which is where Allegheny Center Mall used to be. And now it's at Nova Place.
Jesus.
That village is now the city of Allegheny, and that common cow pasture is a magnificent park of which the two cities are so proud. The man who gave the land probably never dreamed that it would one day be a much valued breathing place for the heart of a great city, much less that the boys who drove the cows through it and stoned frogs in the numerous ponds scattered over it would see it covered with a beautiful sward and decorative with monuments and fountains and shade trees and rare plants and flowers. But under the skillful and patient management of engineers and arboriculturists, the commons grew into parks an equal which could be boasted by few others in the city of the New World. However, as the trees grew, the demon darkness spread its somber wings over the beautiful paradise. The cordon of gas lamps, which once illuminated the walkways of old Allegheny and approaches gradually grew inefficient. As a result, the ground became the rendezvous at night of a species of spook which honest folk did not care to meet. Strolling lovers no longer frequented this resort, and thoughtful or troubled souls ceased to wander there beneath the mellow moonlight and shimmering starlight. What was to be done? Needful ends often suggest their proper means. This emergency of darkness had scarcely arisen when the electrical light flashed into existence. Here was the remedy. Association known as the Allegheny Light Company offered a supply that would drive out the demons. A number of tall poles were erected and a single lamp on the top of each one. Then an iron tower, 125 feet high, hearing 5 powerful lamps, aided by reflectors, was erected near the park lake. This so effectively lighted the area, surrounded by Sherman, North, Irwin, and Western avenues, that the hands and figures of a watch may be seen even at night. So well pleased was the committee that the demon Darkness and his horde of spooks had been driven from our local paradise.
Wow.
So now, that's actually talking about just how dark it was.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a jokey article, but think about what life must have been like in
Back then.
1850s.
Yeah.
Prior. You went outside even right now. It's like 7:00 if you at night, just about. If you went outside now, downtown Pittsburgh, and as a woman, tried to walk somewhere, like you have a pretty good chance of never coming back home.
Yeah.
Like pitch blackness. Who knows what lurks in every corner? Usually real things lurked in those corners.
Yeah.
Not so much strange demon hands or whatever going to grab you and pull you into the lake. But some did.
Unexplainable things.
So I have stories about goblins in lakes. But anyways, as long as, so that's one kind of thing, but I found other accounts talking about prior to when it was still the dark territory.
Yeah.
That Native Americans, when they would kill an animal or do something or hunt or whatever, they would make this whole process about it and kind of, especially the one thing of offering the spirit of the dead animal.
Yeah, like honoring it.
Yeah, the god Manitou. And as a kind of a piece, an offering. And white settlers were moving in here and just killing deer, beaver, rabbit, whatever was laying around, and not doing that. Apparently, having the Native Americans cursing all of the land north of Pittsburgh because of that fact.
Yeah.
Specifically the north side.
Wow.
So it was just always called the dark territory. And you see throughout history this strange kind of dark history that comes out of the north side.
Yeah.
More so than other places like the south side or South Hills or anywhere else. You have stories attached to literally every neighborhood, but a lot more in Allegheny City, old Allegheny.
Wow.
As they called it. And the story of America's most haunted house, they called it. It's supposed to take place there in Allegheny City. So,
is it still there, that house?
Well, no. Now, was it ever there the way it's described? No. Also, was there an actual family named Congliere that lived on Ridge Avenue in Northside at one time? The answer is yes. Now, was their house, did it explode? The answer is yes. Were the children there left motherless without a father and everything like this after this explosion? The answer is yes. A lot of little truths to the story and a lot that's made up. So now if you do go to, and I mean, you could try it, go to Google, type in Pittsburgh ghost stories and you'll see, I guarantee probably the number one hit, number 3 or whatever in there is going to be about the Congliere Mansion or the Ridge Avenue Mansion. And that story's origin is from this book. And it's a short story, but wait till you hear the story, and you'll see why it's become one of Pittsburgh's biggest urban legends. because like it sounds too like it might be real, but it's who knows. I'll let you be the judge. Okay. So the book is called Haunted Houses, and it's by Richard Winter and Nancy Osborne. And it has lots of good chapters in here, things about like the Bell Witch and the Winchester Mystery House and things like that, things about Alcatraz. And for some reason, a story about Allegheny City in Pittsburgh.
All right. Read this slow.
Okay. Story goes, as crazy as it might sound, let me get to the page. Pittsburgh. It's right here. Okay, here we go. So people have been trying to communicate with the dead for as long as there's been communication devices.
Yeah.
Whether that be through drugs, the earliest communication device, or be through
seance, candles.
Essentially, yeah, taking some magic potion and seeing your dead ancestors.
Yeah.
That's people have been trying to do this for tens of thousands of years. A lot of societies and cultures have been built, with ancestor worshiping, and always with every step you make is all in honor of those who came before you, and understand that you'll be kind of a part of the same kind of pattern, right? So but this kind of way of seeking out, trying to prove whether ghosts are real or not, that has been around as early as publications I could find in Pittsburgh. People have been trying to experiment with electricity and other things. And one of these big names, believe it or not, was Thomas Edison. Now, the story goes that Thomas Edison later in life came up with a contraption of machines that he tried to use to communicate with the dead.
Yeah.
Like actual like recording devices and other stuff like early ghost busting equipment. Rumor has it that he tested it in one and only place. This house in Pittsburgh.
No way.
Allegheny. And there's the story of this. Now, I can tell you right now, I'll preface it by saying that while that device might exist, and he did look into it, and if you could find that particular device, there's no real proof whether he ever came. I know he did come to Pittsburgh because he came here a couple times traveling through with like Henry Ford this one time.
Yeah, but you don't know if
did he bring his ghost busting machine here?
Yeah, there's no proof. You're a man that likes proof,
Right,
and I like that too. But I also like the lore around it.
Right. So, what would cause this great inventor to believe in the spirit world? Well, apparently, it was his visit to the house on Ridge Avenue in Pittsburgh, which influenced his outlook on life after death. One day in 1920, while visiting in Pittsburgh, Edison was told of a house in that city's north side where all sorts of strange things have happened down throughout the years. The house is in a neighborhood of old-fashioned brick and frame dwellings, settled mostly by working-class families. Most residents were aware that there was something sinister about the house. Playing children often threw rocks and stones at the red brick building, but few dared to venture near the evil structure. Charles Wright Congliere made a small fortune as a carpetbagger in Texas during the years following the Civil War. He also made a lot of enemies. Deciding that his enemies far outnumbered his friends, Congliere disposed of his assets and headed north by river steamer, taking with him his Mexican wife Lida and their young Indian servant girl named Essie. Very specific. And when the vessel docked at Pittsburgh for coal, Congliere decided that western Pennsylvania town was a good place as any in which to settle and build his new house. The new 2-story brick and mortar mansion at 1129 Ridge Avenue, a short distance from where Allegheny and Monongahela rivers meet to form the Ohio, was the finest house on the block. Now, out from the book, Ridge Avenue was indeed one of the millionaires' row in early Pittsburgh history.
It's still there?
Still there. There's still houses there that are big and awesome. So you just kind of picture that, what that looked like. This specific area is up by CCAC.
Okay.
If you're familiar with that part of Northside.
Yeah.
During the winter of 1871, as the wind howled outside and snowdrifts built up against the house, Congliere discovered that Essie, the Indian servant girl, desired the warmth of a man's body, and he was the only man in the house. Thus began a relationship that Lydia Congliere was unaware of. However, when the three people lived together in the same house, it is only a matter of time before a secret between two of them becomes known by the third party. When the servant girl didn't respond to her call one afternoon, Lydia Congliere went up to the girl's room looking for her. As she approached the door, she heard heavy breathing and groaning coming from within. She hurried to the kitchen and grabbed a butcher's knife and a meat cleaver. Then, standing next to the door, she brought the cleaver down to the head of the first person to exit, her husband. As the servant girl stood screaming in horror, Lydia stabbed her husband nearly 30 times. Several days later, a family friend called at the house. He found Lydia Congliere sitting in a rocking chair in front of a big bay window in the living room. As she rocked back and forth, Lydia was singing a child's nursery song, and on her lap was a bundle wrapped in a pink blanket. It contained the Indian servant girl's head.
Jesus.
After Lydia was taken away, the house remained vacant for nearly 20 years, during which 2 generations of neighborhood children sang about the old battle axe and her meat axe. In 1892, the home was remodeled into an apartment building because housing workers from the industry growing nearby. But after 2 years, the house was again vacant. The workers residing in the building kept hearing a woman's voice sobbing and screaming. The big house stood empty again until 1900, when it was purchased by a Dr. Adolf Brunrichter. Keeping to himself, the doctor was rarely seen by his neighbors. Then on August 12, 1901, the family next door heard a terrifying scream emitting from the Brunrichter residence. When they ran outside to investigate, the neighbors saw a red explosion like a flash shooting from the house. The earth under them trembled, and the sidewalks cracked. Every window in the doctor's house was shattered. By the time the police and firemen had arrived, a crowd was already gathered around the house. It was assumed that the doctor was still inside, for no one had seen him leave. The firemen entered the house and began searching for the doctor. They didn't find him, however. Instead, they discovered a ghastly stomach-turning scene in one of the upstairs bedrooms. Spread eagled to a blood-stained bed was the decomposed naked body of a young woman, her head missing. Further investigation revealed that the graves of 5 more young women were discovered in the cellar. From what the investigators could discover, Dr. Brunrichter had been experimenting with severed heads in the building. Apparently, he had been able to keep some of them alive for a short period of time after decapitation. There was still no trace of the doctor. A manhunt produced no results. Once again, the house at 1129 Ridge Avenue stood empty and abandoned. Neighborhood children feared the haunted house. Only an occasional medium would visit the dwelling. Soon, word spread throughout psychic circles that the house on Pittsburgh's north side was possessed by a terrible presence. Among the many mediums who probed the house was Julia Murray, who detected a horrible presence when she visited in 1922. Objects hurled by unseen hands barely missed striking her. She predicted that the presence would kill her and would eventually extend out beyond the reaches of the house. Several blocks away from the house, the Equitable Gas Company was nearing its completion of a huge natural gas storage complex, which today is located where the casino is. One of the structures was 283 feet in diameter and 208 feet high. It supported a 5 million cubic foot gas tank, and it was the world's largest. To cut costs, a number of regular workers were fired and replaced by lower-waged immigrants, most of them who were Italian. The quality of vacant buildings in the neighborhood were remodeled into quarters for newly arrived immigrants, and the house at 1129 Ridge Avenue was one of those that was converted. Although the Italian workers were aware that something was not right in the Ridge Avenue house in which they were quartered, they stayed on. Apparently, the foreman told them that some of the American workers whom they replaced were embittered and playing tricks on them. Also was an air of general anti-Italian feelings, for the newspapers were full of Sacco and Vanzetti murder trial. So the Italian workmen assumed that there was being victimized by some practical joker. That is, until several months later. One evening, 14 men were seated at the dining table. They had just finished their dinner and were sitting around laughing and consuming large quantities of homemade wine, when one of the men noticed that his brother had not returned from carrying some dirty dishes out of the kitchen. Leaving his jocular companions, the man went out to the kitchen to see what was delaying his brother. In the kitchen, he found the door to the basement open. Suddenly, the merriment of the dining room was shattered by a blood-curdling scream from the direction of the kitchen. Rushing to the kitchen, the men saw the basement door still open. Taking a lantern from atop the icebox, several of the men descended to the cellar steps into the basement. Before they reached the bottom, they froze in their tracks. For in the glow of the lamp, they saw the man who had left the dining room only a minute earlier, hanging from the floor beam. On the floor under him was his brother, a splintered board piercing through his chest. Then a force they could feel but not see brushed past them. They could hear its footsteps running up the stairs, but saw nothing. The door at the top slammed shut. The men waited behind the kitchen, saw nothing, but they later reported hearing the doors being slammed throughout the house. When the police arrived, they reflected the prejudice of most of the townfolk. They attributed both deaths to accidental. The first man, they said, tripped on a loose stair tread and fell, impaling himself on a propped-up board. The other brother's death was blamed on the same stair tread, which death was to be blamed, the police said, made him fall, too, causing his head to become snared by an electric wire that happened to be hanging near the loose stairs. New York's Bowery, and a long way from Pittsburgh's north side. It is the mecca for all the bums, down and outers, and derelicts in the United States. In September 1927, an old man was found there, wandering around in a drunken stupor. As he was being booked before being thrown to the dunk tank, he gave his name as Dr. Adolf Brunrichter. He told of how years early, at the turn of the century, he had bought a house in Pittsburgh to which he enticed 10 young women as guests. Anticipating romance, the women were instead beheaded and used in experiments to keep severed heads alive. Brunrichter told stories of sex orgies, torture, murder, and how he came under the demonic spell of a Madame Enotetta. And he told of another 10 women used for experiments at other locations outside of Pittsburgh as well. The locations of the grave sites were checked, but no bodies were ever found. After a month behind bars at Blackwell's Island, the man the newspaper headlined as the Pittsburgh Spook Man was then released. On the wall of his cell, scrawled in blood, was the message, "What Satan hath wrought, let men beware." Nothing was ever heard again from the man who claimed to be Dr. Adolf Brunrichter. 2 weeks after Brunrichter's release, a catastrophic occurrence took place in Pittsburgh's north side, in the neighborhood of 1129 Ridge Avenue. On Monday, November 14th, 1927, at 8 o'clock in the morning, a crew of 16 workers climbed on top of the Equitable Gas Company's huge 5 million square foot natural gas storage tank to refine and repair a gas leak. Exactly 43 minutes later, a great sheet of flame shot 1,000 feet skyward into the air, and a tank rose into the air like a huge balloon. The surrounding air was rife with flying girders, splintering steel, and falling bodies. 2 of the men who'd been working on top of the tank were thrown against the brick building 100 feet away. Another one where their silhouettes were outlined in blood. It's all hard. They hit the house, it says. Seconds later, another tank 200 feet away holding another 4 million cubic feet of gas exploded, sending a second mighty ball of fire into the air. Then a third tank, only partially full, burst and its contents were added to the cataclysm. Smoke and flames were visible for miles. Windows were shattered, downtown skyscrapers trembled and swayed, water and sewer lines burst, flooding streets, live electric wires were strewn everywhere. The clear day suddenly became night as clouds of black smoke hung heavy over the streets of Allegheny. Across the street from the gas company, the Union Paint Company was flattened. Dozens of workers were buried in the rubble in that building. Hundreds of other structures in Pittsburgh's north side were leveled. Many were crushed like eggshells. Bloody men, women, and children ran frantically about the streets. Battalion Chief Dan Jones of Engine Company No. 47, the first fire unit to arrive on the great scene, described the Holocaust. Great waves of black smoke swept through the streets. There was a whining noise in the air. Even rescue workers were killed and injured as the weakened structures collapsed on top of them. Entire districts were flooded with water from broken main pipes. Houses, factories, warehouses, industrial plants lay in ruins. Entire streets have been heaved up into the air. Sections of the giant gas reservoir were found 1,000 feet away. Many of those who died were killed with falling pieces of steel. On the following day, the headlines of the New York Times read, 24 killed instantly in gas tank explosion in Pittsburgh. 600 people hurt. 13 missing. Ruins dynamited in search for more bodies. By the next day, there were 28 more people dead, 600 injured, and more than a dozen missing. Mobs stood outside of downtown morgue waiting for identification of the unidentified bodies. Others wandered through the streets trying to find where their homes used to be. Mounds of rubble and debris marked where the structures have once stood. Only at one place was there no structural remains whatsoever. At 1129 Ridge Avenue, 2 blocks away from the blast scene, there was nothing. And although the building on either side across the street from the address were heavily damaged, they were still standing. Yet where the house of death, the house where the evil presence once stood, there was nothing. Only an 85-foot deep hole, 75 feet in diameter, marked the site where the house once stood. There was no debris, no wreckage, nothing but a crater. The end.
What the hell? Jesus. That happened in 1927?
Well, yeah. I mean, you can see what the dates. There were very specific dates they mentioned in this story. Now,
Yeah.
that gas explosion really did happen.
Okay, I was going to say.
In November of 1927. It really did kill, 20-something people. Hundreds and hundreds of people were hurt. It was legitimate. Imagine the casino filled with 5 million cubic feet of gas exploding. I mean, it really happened. It really did knock out windows. People died all over the place. And a quick newspaper search, which was not available when this book was written, which was 1978, I believe, is when this book was from. I'll tell you in a second. It was from 1979 is when the book was published. So if you wanted to find out the true story behind 1129 Ridge Avenue or the Congliere name or Alfred Brun Richter, what would be your first step?
Google them.
Right. So you're going to Google them. What you're going to find out is even more stories have been added to the story about that house. And they're all going to mention that house. You'll never see something that says like Dr. Alfred Brun Richter from the 1910 census or something like this.
Yeah.
Because there was no such person as Dr. Alfred Brun Richter. Now, as hard as we've all looked, and I'm not alone, like, I don't know how many other historians throughout time have tried to track down and prove this story to be real.
Yeah.
Because it's such a good story. And there's nothing. So now, does that mean it didn't happen?
Or someone created that in their mind.
Now, there was an 1129 Ridge Avenue. There was, it turned out, a Congliere family who did live there. Now, they didn't live there in 1871, but they did live there during the big gas explosion. And it turns out that they were heavily involved in the mob. Now, the story gets so much more.
I forgot you said that this has mob ties.
The Congliere, this Charles Wright Congliere, was like one of the highest made men in like Allegheny County, and all of his family were there. And his wife was killed in that blast in 1927 from a piece of like shard of glass that shot through the window, leaving all of her kids, motherless. And I have a picture of all of them sitting on the stoop, like in front of 1129 Ridge Avenue, which is where they lived. So that's the thing. So there really was a Conglieres who lived at this house. There really was an 1129 Ridge Avenue.
Well, how the hell does a story like that get written?
I don't know. So that's the question. Like, where does it come from?
Do you think that someone just is good at fan fiction? And like, do you know how much, do you ever read any of the fan fiction online?
Yeah.
Like people are like very good at it.
Yeah.
But maybe this is a creative dude, but like now let's say, now there was no records of like those murders that happened.
None. And then it even mentions that the New York Times published an article with an exact headline. And you can look up the New York Times, and there is no headline. It says the Pittsburgh Spooks or whatever. I have searched the newspaper for every word, every time it's ever said the word spook. And just to see, because it's like a common, that's the thing. When you're looking for old
Yeah, you just
ghost
Google
stories,
key terms and stuff.
Well, you can't just Google ghost. Sometimes you might find it, but you might find specter spelled with an R-E.
Oh, yeah.
Or you'll find spook, or you'll find other weird terminology that might not really be around anymore.
Yeah.
Phenomenon. Just type in that word and see what pops up in the paper when it says the word phenomenon.
Yeah, I guess back
you find
then.
some weird stuff.
Wow.
Especially when you type in phenomenon. There's stuff in the 1700s that appeared in the newspaper of things that were happening around, that people would see or witness that they couldn't explain.
So there was no records of these murders. So it's like that right there. I mean, the story that you read, and by the way, reading out loud was my worst thing that I used to do in school. You're very good at it.
Thank you.
But that story was great. And there was so much detail, and it was like so vivid and like, so
Lady rocking with a head in her lap, whatever.
Yeah, but now that you say this and like that there was no like, real evidence of these murders, it's almost like someone came up with a real good ghost story. You know what I mean?
Pittsburgh's best.
And like, what's the best way to legitimize a fake story and make people think it's real? Mm-hmm. Sprinkle in some fact.
Right.
Sprinkle in a real family, sprinkle in a real home.
Right.
And especially if you find one a family and a real home that might not have a lot of details around them because they're mob ties and that might want to be kind of recluse as much as they could. I don't know. That's wild though. But there being no murders, it takes it away from me.
Right.
But then again, how did this story get written with this?
Right. Very specific story they're talking about. Like specific dates, specific names.
Well, now tell me more about
locations.
the mob, like the mob ties with this.
So, as you know, there is no such thing as the mob, right? But if there was, in Pittsburgh, they did exist, and they do exist, and I guess that's the best way to put it. But they're not like Tony Soprano level today, but they did at one time.
Yeah.
Even in the 90s, they did. So it's just a matter of who you talk to and where you go to. But the Pittsburgh mob really had its kind of beginnings during Prohibition. There was organized crime going on a little bit prior to Prohibition, but not that anything to really write home about. There was mob bosses.
Yeah. What year?
Gregory Conti was the first mob boss. He was 1910.
1910.
So that's when he officially became boss of this area of Western Pennsylvania, because it controlled many different families, like in Ohio, New Kensington, and other places around, where there's still all this stuff going on, like in Steubenville and those type of places, run out of Pittsburgh. So as time would go on, you would have things building up and the crime presence. And when Prohibition becomes happening in 1920, remember, alcohol was illegal for 13 years.
Which is still
that's
wild.
A long time.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So, of course people just didn't stop drinking it the next day.
Yeah.
In fact, they allowed people who had stores, storage of beer to finish it all before they, really got in trouble.
Oh, wow.
But then you had the mob, resupplying them with new stuff, or finding all these bootlegging type of places and trying to organize all the business of the bootlegging. That's what the mob was doing. Not so much like making the stuff. They were just, organizing the deal.
Yeah, they knew how to get things.
There's great stories of the early Pittsburgh mob history. Like this one guy, it's a little off track, but it's still a cool story. This guy who was the current mob boss, his name was, I'm trying to think of his name now, but he was outside of St. John's Hospital, which is on Brighton Road, over in North Side.
Okay.
And he was visiting somebody, one of his made men inside the hospital. And as he got there with his armored car from 1927 or whatever, as soon as he stepped out, 3 guys with Tommy guns, just like open fire. And I'm talking, shot this guy 700 times.
Jesus.
Not just like once or twice, like the
like
papers
drums.
say riddled like Swiss cheese, it said.
Wow. And this is real. This happened?
Really happened, yeah. His brother, the mob boss's brother, who was with him at the time, ran into the hospital, ran out the back of the hospital, and was able to escape, only to be found later, strangled to death with his own necktie on Jack's Run Road. Right? So
Jesus.
This shit like really happened in Pittsburgh. Like
my goodness,
mob hits and stuff like that. It's straight out of The Godfather.
Colombian necktie.
Some of these stories, these ghost stories, in that one in particular, is thought to be kind of a cover up to kind of clear that Congliere name, a way to get it that history of the mob attachment to the house, to get more of the ghost attachment to that house. And sometimes you'll see the origin of these stories of based on real events. So like you mentioned, like there's very specific people, that Alfred Brumrichter guy, this other person that was there. And, and like, is there a truth to these things? Slightly.
Yeah.
And that's a great example.
Just enough to make us talk about it.
Kind of not. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, are there things that, well, I mean, and that's what the purpose of a ghost story is. When it all comes, said and done, if I weren't going to read the story about these Conglieres, would you even know with their names?
No.
Or anything about
but
that
now
area.
I know.
Now
So
you know.
It constructs, you plant the seed and then the plant grows.
Yes. And so and that's kind of like a common factor.
I would be up in the middle of the night Googling these people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you'll see that most ghost stories are going to be about women.
Yeah.
They're going to be about some kind of tragic event.
Yeah.
Things that people didn't really want to be forgotten about.
Yeah, that people can latch on to. You got to give people a meaning behind that.
Think about how many people go nameless and dead, in the prior centuries.
Yeah.
Like, that I know, like, my deep family history, and I know every grandfather and great-grandmother and everything like that. But there's a lot of people who don't. Who are just like this nameless people who
I know
made
nothing
you.
About anything of my family.
These people made you,
Yeah.
And it's like, if we don't talk about them, or they become like just a legend.
It's my biggest regret in life. My great-grandmother was alive whenever I was like, 14, 15, 16. Never took advantage of just asking about our lineage.
That's common. That's not like
I know, and that's how I let myself be okay with it. But it's just like crazy to me. She was like 103, I think she was, but like just like spry, all there. Only got taken out by pneumonia.
Right.
But it's like it's like this lady went from like not having anything to like having, you know, people talking on the phone, just like I could call across the world, and you're just like,
you're talking about somebody who, you know, telephones, radio, television,
Prohibition,
movie theaters, you know, like the
Prohibition, you know?
World War I, World War II,
yeah, you know, like wild shit.
All the other wars.
It's crazy.
A lot of life. So sometimes the only way to memorialize somebody who came before, especially a woman, is like died a tragic death, is through a ghost story. Sometimes it's the only way you knew these people even exist in the first place.
Yeah.
This next example is a quick story, but much more from it. And I'm going to read it straight from Wikipedia.
Okay.
I know it sounds like cheating, but it's not, because it's pretty good.
That's all right. I'm all for all this. This is fascinating. I wish we were sitting around a fire and you were wearing like a wizard hat or something.
Yes. We'll submit this story for the
for approval of the Midnight Society.
Exactly. I bring to you the lost children of the Alleghenies. Have you heard of this story?
No.
The lost children of the Alleghenies were two missing brothers from the Appalachian region of the United States who in 1856, George and Joseph Cox, then aged 7 and 5, disappeared from their home in Pavia, PA on April 24th, 1856. Their dead bodies were found several days later in the surrounding woods, and they were buried in the Mount Union United Methodist Church Cemetery in nearby Lovely, PA. There is a small memorial to them today in Spruce Hollow Forest in the Blue Knob State Park. So if you know where that's at, it's not far from here, really right from here. George, who was 7, and Joseph, who was 5, were the sons of Samuel and Susanna Cox. The Cox family lived in a cabin built by Samuel and his wife and the kids. And at this time, the old growth lodging had not yet begun this area of Pennsylvania, and the area was still heavily forested. During the morning of April 24th, 1856, Samuel Cox heard his dog barking in the forest and thought that it must be a squirrel. Samuel retrieved his rifle and headed to the woods. It is thought that while Samuel was gone, the boys must have strayed from home and to try to follow their father. Susanna thought that Samuel had taken the boys with him. It was only when Samuel returned without them that he realized that their children were even gone. They called the boys but received no replies. Samuel went for help from his nearest neighbors, and by the evening, more than 100 men were searching for these children. Fires were lit in the forest in hope that the boys would see one and approach it. By then, nearly 1,000 people showed up for the search party the next day. This is true. I've read the actual newspaper articles from that 1856, which you could find online.
There was 1,000 people back then?
1,000 people showed up in this small town, okay? A nearby stream, Bob's Creek, was surging and was spring snow melt, and it was thought that there was no way that the boys could have crossed to the other side without drowning. A search of the creek was performed, but the boys were never found. On April 26th, suspicion fell immediately, of course, upon his parents, Samuel and Susanna Cox. It was thought that they might have murdered their children in the hope of gathering donations from sympathetic population. The Cox cabin and garden were searched, but no bodies were ever located. The searchers went so far as to bring in a dowser and even a witch from nearby Somerset County.
What is a dowser?
You know, those dowsing rods, like the triangle, you know, you grab a stick that has two like things and you walk around like looking for water, you know. Well, you can use that, you know, I guess apparently to find dead bodies.
Okay, God, I'm sorry for interrupting.
And that's another thing we can talk about too. What is there power in water, you know, and all that? So anyways, the dowser found nothing, and the witch, of course, despite claiming to know the children's locations, led a search team through the woods for hours and turned up nothing. A local farmer named Jacob Dilbert heard about the missing children and remarked to his wife that he wished to be able to dream of the boys' location, since he had a habit of having these very vivid dreams of real things. And on May 2nd, 1856, so about a week later, he had a dream in which he walked a path through the woods past a dead deer, a child's shoe, and a fallen birch tree, and eventually to the corpse of birch trees in a small ravine. There, he found the bodies of the Cox boys. The dream was reoccurring for 2 following nights. Dilbert told no one but his wife about the dream. However, he felt that the dream was prophetic, And on May 7th, he told his brother-in-law, Harrison Wysong. Wysong recognized Elbers from Dilbert's dream, and the two men decided to make a search, culminating in the discovery of the bodies of the two children.
This dude found this?
Just as the dream had described. Under a birch tree, in a small ravine, reached along a track with a dead deer, a child's shoe, and a fallen birch.
No fucking way. This is real?
It's real. In 1906, this is 50 years later, 50th anniversary of the event, the community of Pavia took up donations for the Lost Children of Allegheny Monument to honor the Cox family. And in 1910, they erected the monument at the spot where Joseph and George Cox were found 50 years earlier. There's a picture of the grave.
Oh my God.
But it's one of the very few true cases of somebody not related, nowhere possibly could have been there or murdered these kids, having a legit dream about it, and then following the steps in the dream and finding dead bodies in this, just like he dreamt. And it was a big deal when it happened, because like this was like something so out of the ordinary.
How didn't they kill him, thinking he was a witch or something?
Who knows? I mean, they had a real witch come there and look. And that's real. That's really did have a real witch.
Jesus, where was this town at? That
some near Somerset County, so it's nearby.
Creepy motherfuckers up there.
Look at the picture.
I seen that. I seen it. I don't even want to look at it no more.
Yeah,
I'm gonna take pictures I'm gonna post all this so people could see how creepy this is. That's insane, and that's all like that's kind of documented through the newspaper and stuff.
Yes. Not only that, you can read about the search when it was appearing in the newspapers.
I have like chills. It's weird.
Then you read about this Joseph Dilbert guy,
and they said that it was like pretty vivid to like a dead deer, a shoe, and that
birch tree. Yeah, like specifics.
Oh my goodness,
like crazy.
Now, full circle. Whenever I said, do you have premonitions? Mm-hmm. Talking about stuff like that. This is what I'm talking about. It's like things like this. Has anything like this ever happened to you where you're like,
oh, for sure. I mean, now, do I think?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Do I think that it's, I'll think of a good example. Like I could have, you have your normal everyday premonitions.
Weird things.
Like someone's about to call you and you know who it is.
Yeah.
That type of thing.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about like, you lost your phone on a hike and you know exactly where to go back.
Sometimes, I can have visions of other things, that are not related to me.
Yeah.
But not things based on my things that are lost or something like that.
Ugh, that's weird. Does this dude have any other things in the newspaper or anything? The guy who found him?
Oh yeah. Well, nothing out of the ordinary.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like nothing out of the ordinary.
Yeah, normal guy. Yeah, there's a picture of him that appears and everything, and it was like he was vouched for. He was like, it was made sure that he was like accounted for the day of the murder and all that.
Wow,
like it was a legit case of someone like having a legit premonition.
That is ridiculous.
Isn't nuts?
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what's up with being up in like Somerset and Mount Pleasant?
Yeah.
Like ever since we talked about that.
Yeah.
It's just like weird to me.
Everything you see now.
I think about it all the time. It's very weird.
It is creepy.
I haven't, and like honestly, the one night my wife fell asleep on the couch and I was just sitting there, and it was like one of them nights that like, you couldn't find anything to watch. And then I started Googling stuff. It was like a week after you and I talked, and like, I didn't even want to start reading it because like it was like very weird to me. Uh-huh. And then my family that lived up there, he was like, that's ridiculous. Like that's, just like,
isn't it?
I don't know. Just so bizarre. And
the fact that zip code is 156.
I know. And he was like, that's what I mean. And I was like, John, like the zip code is 15666. And he was like, holy shit.
Yeah.
And like, I never realized it. But now what's weird is I'm looking at a page you're holding and it's a little kid. So I don't even know what that is going to be.
Yeah. So we'll, I think this is the first article, and it is. Okay. So, to bring it back in a circular motion, back to invisible friends, and then also to the Buddhist philosophy of the tulpa. So now I talked about, I think I talked about maybe last time.
Yeah, you did, because you brought up the boogeyman at one point.
Yeah, so I didn't bring the articles with me then, so I did now, so you'll get to hear it firsthand of what happened to this little girl, little Agnes Kathleen Hughes of Millvale, where now, in case someone didn't hear that first episode, I'll explain what a tulpa is. So tulpa, according to the Buddhist philosophy and other philosophies, is a way to manifest something from your mind into reality. So now a good example of a legitimate tulpa, kind of, would be the Slender Man.
Yeah.
So the Slender Man is a fake story written by some guy on that whatever website, that it was originally on.
Yeah, like 4chan or something.
Spaghetti, or what it was called. What was that called originally? I can't remember what it was called, but it was like all these fake stories, that were put just like this haunted house story.
Yeah.
So good, so well written that you didn't know if it was fake or not. It was like told in a way where if you didn't know, like preface it that it was like a fake story, you would believe it. Anybody would believe it. It sounds like it was a real story. So so much so that as if it became a real story. So much so that those two girls, tried to kill their best friend or whatever because of that story.
Did that girl survive, right?
She did, yeah.
Yeah.
Was stabbed like 17 times.
Weren't they like 12 or 13 or something?
Yeah.
And they were like fanatics about
the story
the Slender Man.
And you had to sacrifice people to the Slender Man. Yeah. That's what it said. So that they could live. They were afraid of the Slender Man.
Yeah.
It was real to them. It wasn't some story or something they read. It was real.
Yeah.
So much so that it caused people to commit crimes. It's the power of your mind, the power of a story, no matter where it comes from. It's pretty powerful. That's a prime example. And the words that you use with children are you have to be very specific, and you have to be careful what you say, because there is a lesson to be learned to this story. And it continues. There's actually a follow-up story of an unrelated boogeyman, which I'll read next. But this one is one that was interesting because it appeared in the newspaper so many times looking for help for this girl.
What year?
This was 1912.
In Millville.
And
this is legitimate. Newspapers.
Yes. I have her death certificate too, if you want to see the death certificate. But anyways, so the title of the article is Parents Appeal for Aid for the Child Helpless from Fright.
And where is this in?
This is from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette.
Jesus.
Willing to give her child over to experimentation by physicians, provided it is painless and will not harm her in any way. Mrs. J.F. Hughes of 638 Evergreen Avenue, Millvale, is driven to the desperate expedient of making a public appeal for some doctor skilled in nerve paralysis to try to get her daughter to walk and talk once again. The child is Agnes Kathleen Hughes and is age 6. She was unusually bright at a very young age and early learned to dance and sing, and until last summer spoke even 3 languages. One day last year, a woman frightened Agnes by telling her that there was a boogeyman in a dark bedroom which the child was going into. The little girl became frightened and went into violent hysterics. From that time onward, she was frightened at any shadow. Gradually, she became unable to walk and unable to talk, until now she is helpless and speechless. Her parents have had her to every physician they know of, but no more who have dealt with nerve diseases. Although they are in moderate circumstances, they are not asking for charity treatment. They can pay within any reason. Since the child has been ill, her younger sister Evelyn, aged only 3, who also can speak 3 languages, is her devoted attendant. Evelyn feeds her sister every night and prays, "Oh God, make Sissy walk and talk again." She cannot understand Agnes's helplessness. Mr. and Mrs. Hughes do not want anyone to examine the child, who is actuated only by curiosity. So that's the first article that appears in the newspaper. Pretty soon, another one appears. Now, unfortunately, I only have 1 page of it, but it gives you a little more sense of kind of what was going on.
How far after that first one was this?
A week later.
Okay. So this was like, they were actively like looking out. Is this the first article you found?
Yeah.
Okay.
The boogeyman has scored another point against Agnes Catherine Hughes, muted and paralyzed through fright when a thoughtless woman told her that the boogeyman would get her. She found quick sympathy when Pittsburgh learned her stories, published in the press a week ago. Since then, Agnes had been in local hospitals where a score of doctors and nurses have applied every method known to science to make her frail little body normal again. 4 times they drained her spine even. 2 weeks ago, they returned her to her parents, blind. She may live but a year, they say. She probably will die before then, the doctors have already said. That is the future of the blue-eyed, sunny-haired little girl whose tragic story is now known coast to coast. At the age of 2, she could speak Slavish, Polish, and English fluently. Now she struggles to express her thoughts into 3 mumbled words: mama, baby, and bye-bye. At 3, she was whirling on her toes, an accomplished dancer. Yesterday at home, she sank helpless to the floor where her mother tried to get her to stand. She roller skated and kitty carried at 4 and brushed herself with the sort of normal things that every high-spirited, normal little girl finds to do. But at 6 years, she is back again in the carriage she left in babyhood, a pale little ghost of energy, propped up by pillows, her fragile hands trying to grasp the things that she can't see, a figure of exquisite pathos. To a single sentence, thoughtlessly spoken, the tragedy is traced. While visiting at the home of a neighbor one day over a year ago, Agnes entered the darkened room. The woman called her back, warning her that, "Don't go in there, the boogeyman will catch you." Tense with fear, Agnes came out, but collapsed, hysterical, at the door. From that night on, every brush and every tree in the dark was the boogeyman to Agnes. Every shadow cast by a chair or a table in her home lurked something to be frightened by her. In the flickering of home lights, she saw only the boogeyman as it followed her up the stairs every night. Patiently, her mother, Mrs. J.F. Hughes, tried to show her that there was nothing peeping from the dark corners, and it temporarily satisfied her until 9 months ago when she continued to play with other children and until the paralysis set in.
Jesus.
Now, I didn't print it out, but the next article, unfortunately, she dies from whatever was mysteriously ailing her after months and months of people trying, these publishing articles. People from all over the United States it was in the AP, it was published even. Also, it was, a wide range of people were trying to come figure out what was going on, and nobody could figure it out. She was literally scared to death by the boogeyman. It was real. It was real to her.
Now,
does that mean the boogeyman doesn't exist? That article just proves it otherwise. The boogeyman does exist. The boogeyman can kill. It's killed before. Here's an article from 1872.
Jesus.
Reported to the coroner was a 2-year-old daughter of Frederick Espy of Homestead. The child was literally scared to death last night, but what caused this fright is still a mystery. Mr. Espy lives at 11th and Ann Street in Homewood. Tuesday evening, his wife had occasion to go up the stairs for something and carried a lighted lamp in her hand. Her little daughter followed her and toilsomely crept up the stairs after her. When Mrs. Espy reached the top of the stairs, she entered a room with the lamp, leaving the stairway in darkness. The little one was then about halfway up the stairs. When an instant after Miss Espy entered the room at the top of the stairs, she heard a piercing shriek of fright from her child. This was followed by the scream after scream after scream, as though something hideous had appeared to startle her daughter. Mrs. Espy and one of her elder daughters reached the child at the same time. She was lying on one of the steps just about halfway up the stairs. Her eyes were dilated with terror. She quivered all over as if about to go into a spasm, and her screams of terror could be heard a square mile away. Mrs. Espy picked up the little one and carried her down the stairs. Efforts to soothe the little one were futile. Instead, the paradoxium only seemed to grow worse. Dr. Fogelman was called, but just as he reached the house, the babe expired. Its death was purely and undoubtedly the result of fright of the boogeyman. But what caused the fright is only guess. Some days ago, an older sister, to frighten the child, told her stories of the boogeyman. The boogie was pictured in the most hideous of manners possible, however, by the child. He is described as a horrible giant covered with long, stringy brown hair. His chief end of life seemed to be catching little girls and eating them. These captures were always effected after dark. Whenever a boogie chanced to catch a little girl in the dark places, he always ate her. The story was told to scare the baby, of course, and it succeeded. Ever since then, she has been nervous and had an awful dread about being left alone in the dark. She was naturally of a sickly disposition and possessed a very nervous temperament. Instead of wearing off, the horror of the story seemed to grow upon the little infantile imagination until she could conjure almost nothing and almost everything that she saw into a boogeyman. Tuesday night, when her mother took the light away and left the child in darkness, I suppose the memory of the awful bogeyman rushed upon her. For her feeble constitution, the strain was too much, and a sudden attack of heart failure resulted in her death. An inquest will be held this morning.
Jesus. And that's like 70 years beforehand?
So it goes to show you the power of what you say to a child, how big that can impact them, and how real you can make the unreal apparently be.
Yeah.
Like there is, as far as we know, a boogeyman, right? But according to this girl, both these girls, there really was a boogeyman, so much so that it killed them. So is there one or isn't there one?
Now let me be the devil's advocate.
Right.
No pun intended. The first story is more unexplainable to me. You know what I mean? Like it's more unexplainable that, you know, it's described as her just immediately seeing like these crazy things and freaking out and then just going like, you know, completely into a vegetable. But the second story, you know, what if this girl had a seizure or something like that, you know? But what if she didn't?
Yeah.
And it's like, it's like, you know, I don't want to believe the latter, but you know, I think it's more interesting to believe the latter. Yeah. I don't think it's more fun to believe it, but it's more interesting.
Or something
that's
that
for
could
sure.
just scare you to death.
Yeah. I used to be, I mean, like my parents would even say, like, I was always afraid of the dark. Always. Still am. You know, there's something very eerie about it. You know, I was in Boy Scouts for, you know, a long time, and we would camp on the weekends, and like, I would be scared to death, you know, going to get wood, going to piss out in the middle of the night. Mm-hmm. We camped at Gettysburg overnight. And this was before I knew that it was like one of the most haunted places in the world.
Right.
And like, I swear to God, the people that were sitting there, we definitely heard stuff, but you know, you thought it was just other campers.
Right.
But you're just like, oh, I don't see any lights on over there. Right. Why would we be hearing stuff?
Well, you know, yeah, I mean, that's
bizarre.
It is bizarre. So now back to my scientific mind, right?
Yeah.
You turn that on and you go, you know, what could literally be causing the death? Of course, it could be brain tumor, it could be a seizure, it could be heart failure, it could be anything, you know. Just so happens that these have to be tied around the boogeyman specifically. There are other cases. I found another one of a 6-year-old shooting his brother and said the boogeyman pulled the trigger, stuff like that.
What?
Yeah. So
that was really in the news?
Oh, yeah. You find that more often than you do.
That was around here?
Yes, in Pittsburgh, yeah. So
Jesus.
It happened, unfortunately, more than it should. Does it still happen? Probably, yeah. Probably now, if you scare somebody big enough.
Have you tried to reverse engineer this, so to speak, and look at the most recent article of the boogeyman?
Oh yeah, I've searched for every word, every spelling of boogie there is.
Well, what's like the most recent?
You get people being scared by imaginary things. Is essentially what it boils down to. Whether it be something as stupid as that Momo sculpture like thing, to legitimately making people like horrified to turn on their phones, to see this image of a joke.
Yeah.
So that's actually a good example of how you could accidentally create something out of nothing.
Yeah, I guess the most recent is Slender Man. That's the most perfect example that you could come up with.
Yeah, that you just literally make it believe it. You tell it enough. You keep repeating the stories. Eventually, there might as well have happened.
Now, let me ask you this. So we talked about your experience seeing the tall shadow figure in your house. Okay, you saw that.
Yeah.
Okay, I saw a shadow figure. I was not scared. It was in Moundsville Penitentiary. I've talked about it before, but I have no reason to make it up. And it was so vivid to me that like, it could not be anything else.
Yeah.
I saw a guy walk across the hallway. I saw his silhouette, from a light. And it was like, to the point where there's no denying it. It wasn't out of the corner of my eye where I just thought I saw it. I vividly saw it. No bullshit.
Right.
And that's the only thing that has ever happened to me. Knock on wood. Right. I don't want things to happen to me because I am very, very terrified of stuff. But has anything ever happened to you besides, where you really like seen things or like felt things besides for that shadow figure?
Oh yeah. I've been on plenty of ghost adventures and ghost investigations where things have happened.
Yeah. I went on a couple where nothing happened.
I've went on 100 that nothing happened. Yeah. And then 2, 3 that something legitimately might have happened.
Okay.
So now I'll explain what happened and you tell me if you think it's paranormal or not. Now, it's definitely paranormal in the sense that it cannot be explained. So it's unexplainable, but is it real ghost or not? One was at the mental institution up in Newcastle.
Okay.
I can't remember what it's called now. Hillview Manor.
Okay.
Is the name of it.
Sounds creepy already.
Exactly. And part of the deal is that you can open up the building, and if you're like a team of professionals, you can go in there and you can just have free roam of the whole
This is abandoned,
place.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Abandoned mental institution. And I was there.
What year? What year? I'm sorry.
Maybe 6 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I thought
6 years ago.
you were going to say this.
No,
is
I'm
from
I'm thinking of a recent one. Yeah.
80s or something.
No, yeah. I've been to like places like Dixmont and other things like that, which were weird and stuff, but but even that wasn't as weird as this. So the, hold on. What was this?
We were talking about the mental institution.
Yes. Hillview Manor.
Hillview Manor. Creepy.
So we all go in there, we all split up in little teams and we're all kind of just wandering around
many?
the place. There was maybe about 15 of us.
And who is this?
I went with the Steel City Ghost Hunters, they're called. They're like a legitimate brand of people that do this stuff.
Okay.
This guy, I don't know what he does for a living, but he bought like the technology, like everything.
EMP machines, all that.
Yeah, weird motion sensing stuff. I mean, the works, laser light stuff. I mean, like he's really took this to another level. Like if it exists, he had it, and extras of it. So we set it up all over the place. And you get weird.
Is this known to be a haunted place?
It's known to be a haunted place. They
Okay.
ran it out on purpose because it's supposed to be haunted, right?
Okay.
Everything's supposed to be like whatever. We all had walkie-talkies on purpose, just so we can keep in touch. And now we kept the walkie-talkies in like the storage room right by the front entrance. So as soon as you walked in, there was a place to put like your backpack and coat, pizzas and things like that, And then you go about and break off in teams, go down to the boiler room.
Now,
go up to
before
the
you do
attic,
this, are you someone who like, are you naturally like a scared person? Like, will you walk in a building by yourself?
Not by myself, but I would definitely walk in with somebody.
Well, I just want now that's
Two
a
people
perfect
like
that's
to
a
go in
perfect
there.
example.
Yeah.
But like, if you were like, oh yeah, I'll absolutely do that, I'd be like, well, you're nuts.
Yeah. I go in there with one other person, but I would never go by myself.
Okay,
For sure. Yeah,
good.
I'm too
I'm
scared.
glad.
I'm scared of everything.
Yeah.
But
you guys broke off into teams and went to different spots.
Yeah, and there was spooky stuff, that happens.
Noises,
Yeah, you think you hear something, or you think you not hear something, whatever, and then we all end up coming back to the meeting room to get some pizza or whatever and have some pop. And people are taking bathroom breaks or whatever, and we're all just kind of meeting up there. Everybody's walkie-talkies there.
Dude, you got to come to piss with me. I'm too scared.
So somebody goes and they're using the bathroom. They're walkie-talkie. They came into the room, put all their stuff down, just like all of us.
Yeah.
And then left to go use the bathroom. Not even a minute later, she starts talking through the walkie-talkie to us, to the room. Okay, telling us like, and it was a very normal sounding thing, like, "Hey, this is Allison. Hey, I'll be right there," or whatever like that, something weird like that, right? And then she comes back in, and she has no walkie-talkie. Her walkie-talkie is there in the room with us. Something else talked through the walkie-talkie in her voice, because it was 100% not her, because people were with her. And something came through and talked very
heard
benignly.
this yourself?
All of us heard it. And there was no way for anyone to like do something or to make that happen.
Hey, devil's advocate. Let me ask you.
That was a weird one.
This dude is a ghost hunter.
Right.
He does this shit. Sometimes you need some shit to happen.
Right.
Do you think that's a possibility that he could have played
Definitely
something?
not. He didn't even know. That guy didn't even know. I guarantee it.
Where was he at?
He was there, but
He might have been in the
he didn't
van
hear until,
playing
like,
a
after
button.
the fact. Yeah.
Now, you don't think that there was nothing that could have been like set up or anything like
There'd
that?
be no way unless somehow. I mean, there would be almost no way. We had such limited amount of there was like 4 walkie-talkies for the whole group.
What even happens in that? Like, what happens in your mind at that point?
We were just like confused more than scared. It wasn't scary because it didn't seem to be a ghost.
Yeah.
However,
Are these the type of
mimicking?
Are these the type of ghost hunters that are like, please say something if you're there?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, but I've been on plenty things with people like that, including ones that are angrily try to entice spirits.
Yeah.
When you're
Well, that's why I was asking you that.
I was with, and that's how she rolls, yelling at the ghosts, to come out.
Oh, yeah.
And I've been on some things with her where things have happened, but nothing too unusual. Yeah, another time where something happened was at the basement of the, it's called It's in Allison Park.
No, you can't move forward. Is that it? That's all that
happened at Hillview Manor the entire time. I was in the boiler room. I was in like this old lady's bedroom.
Did you feel weird?
It was creepy, the whole place.
But like you didn't feel like, that was the only thing.
Nothing. I wasn't spooked out by the whole thing. I would have like gladly walked up and down those halls at any given time. I had no fear.
What did they say?
People were like afraid of all random weird things, like this luggage room. There was like the boiler room, all these other.
No one else had
stairway
like experiences.
That somebody fell down and stuff. Like people were all afraid. Like for some reason, I found it more peaceful there than anything else. And so now I can pick up on intuitions and feelings of buildings and feelings of people.
Yeah,
I can read people and I can read buildings.
Yeah,
but does that mean I can like predict, what's going to happen next? But I could, just generally, from seeing so much or whatever, kind of summarize how someone, is feeling.
Yeah.
Or what they might be feeling. Where it gets weird is when you start going into places that are supposed to be haunted and then they turn out like
you
that
feel
one.
Peaceful, like
where
you said?
That one was like super peaceful, and then you had like this bizarre electronic strange thing that happened that's not really spooky, but it's just like unexplained. So that was like a legitimate thing.
Yeah.
I had another one where the basement of this heritage museum type of place, three of us there.
Where's that?
It was in Allison Park.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of the name of the actual place, but it's right off the main drag of Route 8.
Okay.
There's an old cemetery and an old barn and an old little church, and it's like the oldest thing in that area. And they open it up for like Halloween events where you can come there and stay overnight if you have permission and stuff like that. And these people, same people I went to, actually had permission to go camp out overnight. So plenty of creepy places and creepy rooms, but nothing happened. Not until we were in the basement of like this place that wasn't supposed to be one of the haunted places either. And that three of us were standing there just kind of minding our business, and legit like a cold thing passed through us.
Yeah, you felt it.
Where we felt it. Like the 100% was not like some kind of breeze from outside. It was the middle of summer. It was like August, and there was like a freezing cold, weird blob of feeling that came kind of through us. And it felt through, and specifically like my legs.
Yeah.
More so than anything else.
Now, it's weird that you say the basement, because whenever I went to Moundsville, where I saw that where I saw that shadow figure was on the third floor or on the top floor. I don't know if it was a second or whatever, but at one point they take you outside and then down into where they had solitary confinement, which was like almost a dungeon under the prison. So you had to walk down these like slanted steps outside. And as soon as we got in there, I swear what I felt was like my fingers felt like pins and needles on the tips of my fingers. And it felt like my hands were just like freezing at one point. And like it felt like tingly, but it was like nowhere else I felt it. It was almost like my hands felt asleep. But then as soon as you like got out of there, it didn't feel like anything. And like that's weird and unexplainable. And like you felt something, but like, feeling something like that wasn't it didn't like stick with me as much as like seeing this figure walk across. Now, whenever you felt this like thing pass through you, is that the only thing you felt there?
Yeah. So now there was plenty of creepy stuff. I mean, I sat alone in the dark.
Yeah.
We tried to record EVPs and things. You think you get a couple things like that.
Yeah.
I have gotten some strange EVPs. I got one that was pretty specific, that was out of the ordinary, that was not really explainable. But like, but I don't know if that, what did that or what caused that. Another haunted house in North Hills is a house built in the 1820s. It's been abandoned now. It's still sitting there abandoned, boarded up. It's been about 15, 20 years since someone's lived there. It was on episode 4 of Penn State's Paranormal Ghost Hunters. Yeah, it was like their 4th episode. They filmed it at that house.
What was the house?
It's called Woman in the Window. And it's a story about this interracial couple that moves into this house, who apparently the boyfriend is seeing this ghost in the house of this old woman. And they were like through the window in a constant kind of manner, not in a bad way, but kind of like in a accepting way.
Yeah.
In a weird way. And it was scaring him enough to where the family eventually did move out for legitimately.
Wow.
And left the house just completely abandoned.
What year was this?
They left in probably by 2005, 2006.
Oh, this is recent.
Yeah. And then I had a key to the house after that. And then it's now boarded up and like there's water problems and places falling apart. But I wanted there just because it was an old house.
You've been in that?
Oh, I had a key to it. Yeah.
I was going to say, well, I mean.
Yeah, of course. The basement is pretty cool because the house was literally being like constructed out of logs. So like the floor beams are giant logs, like cut down from the forest right there.
Jeez.
Really cool.
So this couple in 2005, 2006, this guy was seeing this woman in the window.
Yes.
Now, I assume that you researched it.
Of course. I did find a photograph of the people who lived in that house way back in the 1800s.
Did you show that guy?
No. Well, they did find it because they went to the History Center in that episode where they tracked down some of the photos and some of the information.
Did you yourself speak to these people?
Not till years after that episode was filmed. But I got in touch with them because there's a history of hauntings going on at this house, going back to at least 1910 that I was able to find. People who babysat that house in the 1950s I talked to who experienced weird things. And so now I brought multiple psychics to the house. So like I said, I don't necessarily believe 100%.
Yeah.
I want to believe. I want to believer.
Yeah.
But I want to try to rule out everything I possibly can, including the legitimate fact that it might be haunted. So is it? Let's try to prove it. It's not. Or let's try to prove that it is.
Yeah.
One way or another, we need to find an answer.
Well, let me ask you a question. What is proof to you?
Right.
You know what I mean? If you have an EMP that is bing, 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 realistically, there could be an explanation for that. So, I mean, what's proof for you?
Well, I'll show you a picture that I took in the house in the middle of the day. Okay. Now it's a photo of just the house.
Is it an orb?
Well, this house has a lot of orbs, but that's not the orb. The orbs are in unusual places, but what is really weird is this, right? You scroll through these photos. What do you see?
What is that?
That's like a full blown on apparition.
Jesus.
Yeah. So I was taking a photo of just of the interior of the house because it was like an old house.
Looks like a face right there. 2 eyes and a mouth right there.
You can see right through it. Look at the bottom of the photo. Look where there's like a plug in the wall. You could see through it. And wait, let me see this back. Now, in that same room.
When was that? When did you take that picture?
This is probably like 2007. You'd have like specific orbs.
Yeah, I saw
walking
that.
down the steps. The weird one is this. The very last thing on here. I didn't know that I took this. I took a photo of everything in the house because this is a historic house. It's from built in 1820s. It has skeleton key door handles still. It's legitimately an old house. So I took a picture of one of the skeleton key doors. Now the door was propped open all the way and against the wall. So there was nothing there was nothing behind it. It was just a wall behind it. And there was no way for anyone to be behind it.
Tell me it's shut.
I was there, which is me, that psychic, who happened to be a commissioner for Ross Township. And I think it was actually just me and her. And we were just randomly taking photos inside the house at 2 p.m. when nothing creepy could be happening, right? And I snapped this photograph. I'll send you the photograph so you can post it. I took a photo of one of the doors. Zoom in to the keyhole. Now, I didn't even know this after I took it. It wasn't until 8 years later. I posted on Facebook when I did it, in 2007. Who knows, 15 years ago or something. Not until 5 years ago did someone say, "Hey, have you looked at this photo? Have you zoomed into this photo?" I was like, "No, I just took it because it was an old door handle and stuff." He's like, "Look in the keyhole."
What the fuck?
What is that? It's like an eye.
Oh my goodness.
Staring out from the other side. How is that even possible? The Book of the Dead, an eye coming through the.
Yeah, it literally looks like, now that you say it, it looks like the eye off of the Hocus Pocus book.
Yeah.
Jesus.
So I'll have things like that where I'll go into a place, take a whole bunch of photos, and then not till after the fact.
What the
fuck? What is it?
Jesus. It looks like some skin under an eye right there.
It's against the wall. You know? So I didn't even know that when I posted it. I didn't, not until years later.
Wait. Let me see that again. Wait. Oh my God.
It's freaky.
It's against the wall. I thought it was
the wall, the door's against the wall. There's it's flat behind that picture. It's insane.
Dude.
Creepy.
You know how you were telling me about the Mount Pleasant stuff and my eyes were watering last time? Yeah. My eyes are starting to water. I don't even know why. It's just
that's creepy.
It's just it's like Jesus Christ.
Yeah. So like I'll find things like that where it's like after the fact, there's some weird stuff I might have photographed or done. Oh, another house where it was weird was this person in Millvale who contacted me because their house, they're not just them, but their parents and their grandparents. It was they've lived in this house for over almost, I think, 85 years. The guy told me, like generational through this house. So if there was a ghost, it was definitely one of the great uncles or grandpa. Or they knew who it was. They knew it wasn't going to be some random guy.
I can't even believe that eye. Like, look at my eyes. They're just like watering.
It's the creepiest photo I've ever seen. I know.
Like I don't know why they're watering, but like it's just like that. Like that's honestly, like, now that you say it, it's just like
every door handle you see from now on, you're gonna be
well. Luckily, I don't got none of them weird ass door handles now, but that is really like bizarre. Like that is bizarre.
That freaked me out especially after I saw it after the fact.
Yeah, that's super crazy.
That was happening there. So.
That is so weird.
Another place in Millvale called me. He says that they've been having hauntings there for 100 years. You know,
what year is this?
Family. This was just 3 years, maybe 2 years, right before the pandemic.
Jesus. All
right. I still get calls all the time to investigate hauntings all over the place. Some I turn down, some I go, it depends on where it is.
What makes you turn them down?
I had one where it just sounded too weird to get involved with. And it was a house randomly out some, country road over by, next to Crescent Township, somewhere in Crescent Township. And the story goes, what these people were calling us about was us, meaning me and a couple of different psychics and other people that I couldn't, we'll kind of collaborate.
Yeah, the Ghostbusters.
Yeah, exactly. They tell us specific things that have been happening in their house. One, which kind of freaked out the psychic too much so that they did not even want to continue talking on the phone to these people. And that was that they kept on discovering.
We're sorry. You have reached a number that has been disconnected or is no longer in service. If you feel you have reached this recording in error, please check the number and try your call again.
Hello, friends. Sorry to leave you with that cliffhanger. You just completed part 1. Part 2 will be out in a week, Thursday. Saddle up, buckle up, get ready, because it's just as crazy. Actually, it might be crazier than the first part. I don't know. I can't remember. But appreciate everyone listening. Call you right back.